So the Toronto Raptors look like they're probably going to be in the playoffs as one of the lower seeds in the conference, probably the 7th or 6th seed. And if they do go in the play-in tournament, I expect them to win. And even though this season they're probably going to have to verse the 2 or 3 seed in the conference, I generally think the Raptors are a team that can give problems to the top teams in the Eastern Conference and maybe even upset them. And that has led me to make this video where I'll be discussing why I think the Toronto Raptors can potentially upset a top seed. But before we get into the video, I ask you to drop a like on this video as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want daily NBA content. Also, if you want to my goal of 3,000 subscribers. Also, drop a comment on this video as I do respond to all of my comments. And play that intro. First reason I think the Toronto Raptors could potentially pull off a first round exit is due to the fact that the Raptors low-key and underratedly have one of the best starting lineups in the NBA. Their bench on the other end is one of the worst in the league, and that's probably their biggest weakness, but their starting lineup of Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby when he's healthy, Scottie Barnes, and Pascal Siakam is absolutely fantastic with a perfect mix of elite defense and solid offense. When this lineup is playing for the Raptors, they're one of the best teams in the league and it's not arguable, but when their bench is put in, they're really terrible. The Raptors starting lineup is top 5 in the league in starting lineup scoring points per game because everyone's averaging over 15 points and they have 2 20-point per game scorers. This is honestly a sign that this team can go with any team in the NBA when it comes to the starting lineup. And they have Fred VanVleet leading the team, the all-star, averaging 20 points. He's being one of the best passers in the league, solid shot creator, a guy who always steps up in the big moments, so I think he definitely can step up in the series and go off. They have Gary Trent Jr. has been playing amazing as of late. He's been averaging 18 points overall this year, but he's definitely capable of being a 20-point scorer. He's also one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, also one of the most underrated defenders in the league. He's at the top of the NBA when it comes to deflections, and he's really solid on and off the ball on defense. OG Anunoby has really grown to be arguably the best 3-and-D player in the league, averaging 17 points while being a top 10 perimeter defender in the league. He's also versatile, can guard a lot of positions except really the 5 spot, but he's definitely one of the better players. And then they have Scottie Barnes, who I think is the second best player in the Rookie of the Year race. He's already one of the most versatile defenders in the league. He can literally almost guard every position except centers. He's a guy who can score the ball, attack mismatches, get a lot of rebounds, and often he can sometimes go off for huge games where he just looks like a future Giannis. And then there's Pascal Siakam, who, if I'm being honest, is the guy who I think is the best player on this team just because of his all-around play. Definitely one of the most underrated players in the league, and I think he's ready to redeem himself after the terrible playoff run he had in the bubble. He's been averaging 22 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists. He's been one of the best players in the Eastern Conference, if we're being honest, and I hope he just can produce in the playoffs this year. He's a really versatile defender who could guard a lot of forwards and centers who aren't crazy skilled, but regardless, he's just a lineup filled with a bunch of guys who can flat out score the ball. Everyone in the starting lineup's averaging over 15 points and they have 2 20-point per game scorers. The lineup isn't the greatest when it comes to floor spacing, but I would say it's not a big problem because they have a lot of above average 3-point shooters on the lineup, and at least everyone on the court is somewhat respected from the 3-point line. Maybe Scottie Barnes, but he's shown some games that he could shoot the 3. And especially on defense, this team has to be scary because everyone on the court is above average to being a really good defender. And even the worst defender in this lineup, in Fred VanVleet, when he really tries, is a really good defender, and we also saw what he did to Steph Curry in the finals, giving him absolute fits. The next reason I think the Raptors can upset a top seed is because this team probably has the best defensive matchups in the league, probably. Because as I stated before, they just have a crazy amount of really good defenders, and obviously that's great in a playoff series when you can get a guy to match up on every other best player on the team, on the other team, and you feel comfortable with it. The way this team's constructed, they have a guy to guard the opposing team's best guards, best forwards. The big man position is probably the weakest spot for them, but on the perimeter, there's few teams that can guard the perimeter better than Toronto. When you look at the Eastern Conference standings right now, the lowest I think the Raptors could go fall to is the 8th seed, and the highest I think they could go to is the 6th seed. And when you look at the East, the top 4 seeds are kind of in a close space right now. It looks like the Heat are for sure going to be one of the top 2 seeds, so there's a chance the Raptors could face them. The Bucks are behind them, but not by a crazy amount, but still a significant amount. The 76ers are right behind the Bucks, right on their tails. Then it's the Bulls and Celtics, who have been on fire as of late. And to be honest, I think the Raptors match up crazy well against all of those teams except for Philadelphia. When it comes to the Raptors trying to go against the Heat, they have multiple defenders to throw at Jimmy Butler, like OG or Gary Trent. Bam Adebayo isn't as dominant a center as Joel Embiid, so I think you could get away with putting Pascal Siakam on him. And I think Fred VanVleet or Gary Trent Jr. can do a solid job on Kyle Lowry or Tyler Hero. Then you just have a bunch, then you just put some random guys on Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. And you know what I mean? I think the Raptors also match up well with them on the defensive side of the floor. When it comes to the Milwaukee Bucks, the Bucks are really hard to stop on offense, mainly because of Giannis Antetokounmpo. But in the past, we have seen the only way to stop Giannis is to make a wall against him. And in the Eastern Conference, the Raptors possibly have the best personnel to stop Giannis, because when you're trying to make a wall against Giannis, you have to have a lot of long, smart, and strong defenders, and the Raptors have just that. They have guys like OG, Scotty Barnes, Pascal, along with guys like Chris Boucher, Kem Birch, Precious Achua, and Thaddeus Young. Defenders who are athletic and strong. They definitely can give the Bucks some trouble, and I feel like they could do a solid job closing out to the shooters. But regardless, the Bucks are going to be pretty tough, but I do feel like they match up well defensively against them. When it comes to the 76ers, that's where I think they'll have a problem, because the 76ers' best player is Joel Embiid, and he's the best offensive center in the league, and Embiid has been dominant this year, and honestly I just don't see anyone on this Raptors squad who can give him any type of trouble. Sure, they can double team him, but that's just going to leave the other shooters wide open. When it comes to guarding James Harden, I feel like OG can do as good of a job as anyone on him, but it's still James Harden. He's still probably going to score 25 if he really wants to. Tobias Harris is not that good, so we're not worried about him. But Tyrese Maxey, he's kind of tough, not going to lie, but Gary Trent Jr. could do a solid job on him. And I feel like those guys could struggle a bit with the length of Toronto on the perimeter. But in the paint, Joel Embiid might average 40 points in a series, because there's not really anyone in the NBA who can guard Joel Embiid, but the Raptors specifically have no one to guard him. Because if you remember last year in the Hawks, he averaged 35 points a game on Clint Capella. And Capella is one of the better defenders in the league. So Raptors don't have a center like that. So yeah. And to be honest, if we have to discuss the Raptors guarding the Bulls, to be honest, I don't think the Bulls are a serious title contender anymore after seeing how much times they've lost to the good teams in the league. I know they've been missing Alex Caruso and Lonzo Ball, but there's no way you could be a legit contender losing to every single good team. At a certain point, you just can't make an excuse, so I think the Raptors could beat them, because they have a bunch of defenders to throw out DeMar, Zach LaVine, and we all know how DeMar underperforms in the playoffs. And then for the rest of the roster, it's not no one's amazing. Not saying the Bulls wouldn't be a tough matchup, because they're probably a better team than them. They're obviously a higher seed for a reason. And to talk about the Celtics, I think this would actually be a tougher matchup than people think, because the Celtics defense is just absolutely amazing. But recently, the Raptors the Raptors have a lot of guys to throw at guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And if we're being honest, outside of Tatum and Brown, the rest of this roster is very weak offensively. So they just have a bunch of good defenders that I think can stop most of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, especially in the playoffs. Not saying the Raptors are going to beat any of those teams, but I'm just saying they can throw some defenders at them, which could make them struggle. But to conclude the video, it's looking really unlikely the Raptors fall down to the 8th seed, since they have a huge win advantage over the Nets. And honestly, I think the Raptors can catch up to the Cavaliers, especially when you realize how much injuries they've been dealing with. So regardless, the Raptors are going to have to face one of the best teams in the East, and I think they have a better chance versing them than most people would think. I'm not saying they're for sure going to upset, because at the end of the day, the Raptors are the 6th or 7th seed for a reason. The top seeds are high for a reason. But this Raptor team is dangerous, and it can make some noise in the playoffs. I don't see them getting swept by any team except maybe the Milwaukee Bucks, because I just think the Milwaukee Bucks are that good. Anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Let me know whether or not you think the Raptors can upset a top seed. Drop a like on this video and tell my channel to grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want daily NBA content. Also, running for over 3,000 subscribers. Also, drop a comment on this video because I do respond to all my comments. Play that intro.